Valhalla, Cyberpunk Bartender Action is a 2016 booze 'em up. It's a visual novel where you play as a bartender in a cyberpunk metropolis of Glitch City, dealing with the crushing authoritarian existence in a city that should not exist, where individual liberties are nothing but a... Wait. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. The story of Valhalla is a story that doesn't start when you see the title screen. It doesn't start at the initial development during the Cyberpunk Game Jam of 2014, and it even starts long before the creation of developers Sukeban Games. It begins at the turn of the 19th century. South America was ruled primarily by Spain and Portugal, and a bunch of people had decided that they were tired with monarchy. With countries like the United States and France being mostly successful in their revolutions, to varying degrees, many South American countries decided to follow suit. Enter Venezuela, who, after some conflicts between Creole revolutionaries and some mixed-race loyalists, they were united under Simón Bolívar, who helped overthrow the Spanish government and instate a new democracy with him as president. Though despite the successful and mostly non-violent revolution, Venezuela would have many struggles leading up to the 20th century, including a diplomatic crisis with Great Britain, the country gaining large amounts of debt, and various civil wars occurring within the country that would eventually see Juan Vicente Gómez seize power of the Venezuelan government. Though soon it would be discovered that Venezuela was sitting on the largest oil reserve in the world, which would jumpstart the country's economy into this big economic boom, with Venezuela being eventually considered the richest country in South America by 1935. This allowed Gómez to help transform the government into a dictatorship, which would last beyond his death in 1935. The dictatorial power would be temporarily overthrown into a democratic rule in 1945, led by Romulo Betancourt, though this would again be overthrown by a military junta in 1948. There would be an effort to try and install a new democratic government, most notably in 1958 when the three major political parties agreed to sign the Punto Fijo Act, an agreement that would say that each political party would accept the results of the 1958 presidential election in order to ensure that the country would not be thrown into a dictatorship again. And things would run pretty smoothly after that, with the occasional guerrilla rebellion notwithstanding. And the country would come into even more wealth as oil prices skyrocketed in the 1973 oil crisis, after the United States was cut off from their Middle Eastern oil supply. Though when the Middle East lifted the embargo and oil prices normalized, the Venezuelan economy was severely crippled, leading to riots, rising poverty and crime rates, and created a steady rise in political corruption. In a reaction to this, then-President Carlos Perez transformed the democratic Venezuelan government into an authoritarian state, implementing harsh economic policies that would seize and privatize many companies, decreasing federal spending on schools and government services, and increasing the cost of services like electricity, water, and telecommunications. This being done with very little political support, which led to widespread social unrest. Many government institutions became all but useless, and the population became more marginalized than ever before, with corruption being at an all-time high. As a reaction to this, a large leftist social movement, later called the Bolivarian Revolution, would see their leader Hugo Chavez seizing the presidency in 1998. Though because of the opposition from the middle and upper class, anti-Chavez sentiment was incredibly high from the start. With the opposition so high, there were even threats of strikes from the oil industry, who were still the lifeblood of the Venezuelan economy. This, coupled with rapid rises in inflation and rising shortages of basic necessities like flour and milk, led to Venezuela being rife with political instability, even with the death of Chavez in 2013. And things would only get worse after Nicolas Maduro, Chavez's hand-picked successor, fraudulently won the presidency and continued Chavez's governing style of marginalizing and incarcerating political opponents, electing federal judges to encourage political deadlock, continuing to be restricted of basic amenities for Venezuelan citizens, and ramping up military spending in order to strengthen his defenses should the public rebel. Maduro even going so far as to enact a state of emergency in May of 2016, in which he was granted even more government authority, to the point where the Economist Intel Unit, a UK-based intel unit that analyzes political trends, election data, and the level of civil liberties in order to accurately rate a country's state of democracy, ended up ranking Venezuela 107th out of the 167th recorded political regimes in the world, with it being the lowest rated country in South America. Just to give you an idea of how low this is, Venezuela is only 10 ranks above countries considered authoritarian regimes, like Ethiopia, Cuba, North Korea. And as a result, the presidency of Maduro is opposed by a majority of the country, with many speculating Maduro will be overthrown in the near future. So you have a government that has a long history of authoritarianism and political instability, a constantly mismanaged economy that is dangerously reliant on oil, an environment that is continually suffering from drought and food shortages, all of this badly affecting the population, which is more disenfranchised than ever. If you put all of this together, the future of Venezuela seems incredibly uncertain, as the country seems to be moving towards conflict. In the midst of this climate of uncertainty, three friends, Christopher Ortiz, Fernando Damas, and Michael Kelly, got together to create Sukeban Games, a blog to celebrate their love of games and anime back in 2012, 1 year before Maduro would be sworn in as president. Despite their restrictive environment, the group would develop a large community and were able to make a short visual novel to celebrate their community. This led to them participating in the 2014 Cyberpunk Game Jam, where Ortiz wanted to make a cyberpunk game where you would specifically interact with the various archetypes that were seen throughout cyberpunk dystopias as just a regular bartender. After placing 23rd out of the 263 Game Jam entries, the three decided to expand their current concept into a full game, and over the span of the next 2 years, they expanded development, were picked up by the publisher Cyberpunk Games, and were able to release 2 demos, which were recently patched into the full game as 2 prologue chapters, all while regularly updating their blog and communicating with their growing fanbase. If you're interested in this game, or interested in the process of game development, this is a really fascinating read I would recommend. Eventually, Valhalla was able to hit a worldwide release on June 21st, 2016, a little over a month into President Maduro's state of emergency, which is not only a testament to how creativity and passion allows many to succeed even in the most oppressive circumstances, but it also demonstrates how our increasingly globalized world allows us to see perspectives that aren't as easily exposed to us were it to come from the usual first world countries. But with all of that background going into this game, how does it actually play? As I said earlier, you play as a young bartender in an oppressive cyberpunk environment, where you come into contact with all these cyberpunk archetypes that you would normally expect out of a game like this, like the sexy hacker lady, the cyborg assassin, the genetically spliced fox person, and the energetic robot. You take their orders, you mix their drinks in a almost too forgiving drink menu, and you learn more and more about their characters while trying to earn enough money to pay rent. And just like any other visual novel, the main crux of gameplay comes when you make choices which later influence the characters and their relationship to you. Though unlike other visual novels, you make your choices through your drink orders, often having control of how much alcohol you put in the drink, whether or not you get the order right, or whether or not you know enough about the character to learn their drink preferences. However, I share many of the criticisms that this game received when it was released. Dialogue at times seems a little too unnatural for the sake of world building, the drink mixing mechanics seem a little simplistic and repetitive, and some of the drink requests sometimes feel way too vague to discern what exactly these people want from you. And these were the only times I ever broke my no mistake streak.
How the hell am I supposed to serve this cordial red drink game? You never show me what the drinks look like!
Though what this game lacks in its gameplay, it makes up for it in its characters and writing. Despite the fact that many of these characters are based off of very two-dimensional archetypes, the stellar writing and character development imbues these characters with a great deal of nuance and life as you learn more and more about them as the game progresses. Though what really sells this game to me, compared to other cyberpunk titles like System Shock, Deus Ex, and Read Only Memories, is how relevant to the world it feels. To me, the best cyberpunk stories are those that are able to capture a certain mindset, that is occurring in the society during its creation. The first Alien movie and Blade Runner were able to capture the growing fears of industrial and urban decay found in the late 70s. Akira best reflects the growing sentiments of alienation found in the Japanese youth of the late 1980s. And Valhalla is able to accurately emulate what it's like to live in a third world country like Venezuela in our age of globalism, which is something that the developers wanted to capture while making this game. While it is easy to see some of the more traditional cyberpunk influences in this game, your Blade Runners, your Akiras, and your Snatchers and Police Knots, much of the nuance and smaller details in this game reflects many of the issues that are found in Venezuela right now. Every morning you read some sort of depressing news story about mass emigration, poor economic policies, and a prime minister that is clearly modeled after Maduro and Chavez. And the opening cutscene depicts a shop that is completely sold out of food, and the fact that the cheapest drink you can serve is $80 reflects the high rate of inflation that is running rampant in the city. Characters will also nonchalantly ask if the bar is a front for human trafficking, and the arguably most popular character is Dorothy, who is a robot sex worker who doesn't upgrade her age appearance in order to take advantage of her line of work. Both of these facts are very reflective of Venezuela's legalization of prostitution, and the government's incredibly lax treatment of underage prostitution and the rampant human trafficking industry, which is really ironic because Dorothy is one of the most positive portrayals of a sex worker, not just in video games, but in most other pieces of media, with the developers noting how she's not just a sex worker out of some contrived or tragic past. She's one because she likes it, and she doesn't end up being any less of a human, or droid trying to be a human, because of it. Which points out how commonplace such practices are in Venezuela compared to other countries, where there are many people like Dorothy who fill a certain demand that is permitted in that environment, and as a result being one of the few people that can make a stable income. Another character that reflects this conflicted environment in Venezuela is Sei, who is a medic for the White Knights, the standard law enforcement group of Glitch City. Looking at these designs, these stormtrooper-like characters would probably be your standard grunts in any other cyberpunk game, which greatly parallels how Venezuela's army and police force are largely complacent to the policies of President Maduro, to the point where he has been slowly ramping up their reach in order to better enforce his regime. Now, instead of characterizing her as corrupted or complicit in this regime, as other cyberpunk stories might have, here they decide to humanize Sei from her evil authoritarian exterior, portraying her as someone who joined the White Knights because she genuinely wanted to help and protect people, while having the full knowledge of how corrupted the White Knights really are, even going so far as to say that Sei's reason for joining the White Knights was because she was inspired by someone who saved her and her friend from being raped by another White Knight. Sei strikes me to be one of the more interesting characters in this game. She has full faith in herself and her ability as a White Knight, but at the same time she is fully aware of the negative aspects surrounding her job, which is a reality that many law enforcement officers, not exclusively to Venezuela, have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. How do you reconcile pursuing a career in a field that is not only seen as corrupted by the public, but at the same time you are expected to perform your duties, not just from your superiors, but also that same skeptical public? Though Sei's continuing struggle to do her job without issue, to me demonstrates this inherent desire to do good for others, no matter what environment it takes place in. But the one moment that really struck out to me was when everyone was casually discussing the loud explosion-like noises that were being heard outside, with everyone having their own ideas of what the loud noises were. Some saying they were gunshots, others saying it's a car backing up, and others saying that it's someone just dropping someone. But no one's actually going out there to see what it actually is. When these characters debate what loud noises are being made, you're almost getting the indication that this isn't the first time they've had such a debate, that such potential violence is just commonplace, to the point where a loud gunshot is just as expected as someone dropping a box. This to me most effectively illustrates the crushing feeling that must come with living in a place like Glitch City or Venezuela. After living somewhere where violence, hunger, and exploitation become such a day-to-day nuance, eventually you just become used to it, which to me is an extremely terrifying prospect. Honestly, the best way to summarize such environment comes from Christopher Ortiz himself in an interview with Killscreen.com, where he states how Glitch City, and also Venezuela by extension, are really depressing societies where everyone is always sad and worried about the future in a country with no hope of recovering. Cyberpunk stories often are written to reflect the same fear and uncertainty that comes with the future, especially in such an authoritarian society like Venezuela. If there is one last piece of praise I can give to this game, it's how unapologetically joyous it is despite the circumstance. All throughout the game, there are these moments of happiness and joy which are often happening in moments where these characters should feel discouraged and defeated in their situation. Though Ortiz notes how they came up with this set of characters who, in the middle of this disaster, try to go on with their lives and try to be as happy as they can be with what they have, which is something that I feel that many can identify with as we progress towards a very uncertain future. Just as Ortiz says, it's up to us to try and go on with our lives and try to be as happy with what we have, to fight for what we believe to be good in this world, and to let our environments consume us and let us lose our happiness. So to the lovely people at Sukeban Games, I know I will never be able to fully understand what it's like to live in a place like Venezuela, and I honestly hope I never have to. But I want to thank you for giving me at least a little insight and a lot of hope with the game you've created. I look forward to seeing what you do next, just as I look forward to the future, and I hope you will all too. Thank you for watching. Best wishes. Also, you get to serve drinks to corgis, so 10 out of 10, best game ever!